Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of KRAD COVID Readings. I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, here to read my stuff. This week we are continuing Achtung Monster, or as we say in English, Here There Be Monsters, which was the Starfleet Corps of Engineers contribution to the Gateways crossover back in 2001. Before we do that, however, I just want to once again mention that I have a Patreon. It's awesome. You should check it out. There are movie reviews, one per month, which you can get for just $1 a month. For $2 a month, you can get not just the movie reviews, but also cat pictures, which I post on a ridiculously regular basis, and we have the most adorable cats. Plus, there are occasional guest cats and even an occasional guest dog. But most of it's Kaylee and Louie, but man, they're cute. For $5 a month, you get those plus TV reviews. I do anywhere between 1 and 5 TV reviews per month, depending on the month. For $7, you get all that, plus a weekly excerpt from one of my works in progress. Currently, if you subscribe, you'll get excerpts from Feet of Clay, which is the second of the Brom Gold adventures that I'm working on right now. For $10 a month, you get all of that, plus a monthly vignette featuring one of my original characters, whether from the Precinct series, Cassie Zukov, the Brom Gold, the Super City Cops, or Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson. And there have been lots of really cool stuff that I've done, little vignettes I've done with those characters. And then finally, for $20 a month, you get all of that. Plus, you get a first look at my first drafts as I complete them. Anytime I complete a chapter of a novel or I complete a short story, you get to see the first draft. So it's all cool stuff. Patreon.com/crad. And it's cheap. I mean, the most expensive is $20 a month, and you can get lots of neat stuff for much less than that. So please consider it. Anyway, without further ado, here is Chapter 3 of Here There Be Monsters. You understand, Captain, that normally we wouldn't send in the S.C.E. for this sort of thing, but Starfleet is still stretched a bit thin, and you are in the area. Captain Gold kept a pleasant expression plastered to his face as he responded to Admiral Koike. Of course, Admiral. Besides, we do have a history with Meglin, and they did ask for us by name. True. The Malinche will be there in 3 days. But of course, you should go in and do what you can to placate the Meglin authorities until they arrive. Of course, Admiral. Gold somehow managed a smile. Good. Keep us posted as to your progress, please, Captain. Koike out. As soon as Koike's face disappeared from the screen, the pleasant face and smile fell, and Gold let out with a curse or 6 in Yiddish, concluding with, "Damn desk jockeys." "Transporter room to bridge," came the voice of Diego Feliciano over the comm. "Go ahead, Chief," Gold said, getting his voice out of what his wife called grump mode and back into what he himself thought of as command mode. "Commander Duffy and Mr. Stevens are back on board, sir." "Good." Corsi and her team had beamed up just before Gold's little chat with the Admiral, and Gomez and Blue had already docked the Archimedes. He turned to the ensign at Khan. "Set course for Meglin, Wong. Maximum warp." "Yes, sir." Turning to the tactical station behind him, Gold said, "Call a meeting in the observation lounge in 5 minutes, McAllen." The lieutenant nodded, and Gold got up to get a quick bowl of soup before the meeting. If they were going back to Meglin, he needed fortification. Domenica Corsi was exhausted. She had spent the better part of a day coordinating with the Tellarite police force, which had some unpronounceable name or other, to control the looting that was going on in the capital city, which had an even more unpronounceable name. This was a result of the city's primary generator going down. That, in turn, was the result of some kind of gateway opening up on the planet, one of thousands that had opened all over the galaxy, apparently. Corsi didn't know the details and didn't much care. She did her job as Da Vinci security chief and kept the looting to a minimum until Duffy and Fabe fixed the generator. As she approached the quarters she shared with the ship's chief medical officer, she cursed at herself. Duffy and Stevens, damn it, not Fabe. He's just another crewmate. Yes, he was nice to me that night when I needed him, and he's been good enough not to make a fuss about it since. But it's over now, so stop thinking about him that way. Cursing Dar for the millionth time, she entered her quarters and was surprised to see Dr. Elizabeth Lenz sitting on her bed reading a pad. "What are you doing here?" Corsi asked. Lenz smiled a small smile. "I live here." "No, I mean Hawkins and Eddie are in sickbay. They got knocked around by some Tellarite kids. Why aren't you in there treating them?" I'm letting Emmett handle it, Lenz said, using her preferred nickname for the Da Vinci's emergency medical hologram. He can use the experience. Unlike the two previous EMH models, Emmett was on a kind of learning curve, and also was a bit less acerbic, akin to a first-year intern. Starfleet Medical thought this model might be easier to deal with. Corsi considered arguing the point, then decided she was too tired. She walked over to the replicator. Computer, double espresso. As the drink materialized, Corsi thought back to that wonderful summer on Earth when she was 12, going to the Cafe Roma in New York City. That was the first time she'd ever been to Earth. Her parents were colonials, and also the first time she'd had espresso. She hadn't been able to live without the stuff since. The Da Vinci replicator had done a particularly good job with it, thanks to some tinkering done by P.A. Blue on Corsi's behalf. Sometimes it's good to serve on a ship full of tech heads. S.C.E. team, report to the observation lounge. Corsi closed her eyes. Damn. Should have known there'd be a meeting. We're being diverted somewhere. That always means a meeting. Within 5 minutes, she and Lenz had arrived at the observation lounge. Gomez and Duffy were already there, and the others arrived soon enough. Corsi noticed that Duffy and Gomez were staring at each other in a manner that was intended to be subtle, and had the reverse effect of being stunningly obvious to everyone in the room. Corsi shook her head. I take it everything on Talar went well? Gold said by way of starting the meeting. Yes, sir, Duffy said. The Tellarite High Muckety-Muck sends his personal thanks to you and the crew for all the work we did repairing the gateway damage. Gold frowned. He's not actually called that, is he? No, sir, but I wouldn't dream of trying to pronounce it. Bart Falwell then let loose with a barrage of syllables. At Duffy's sharp look, the linguist smiled and said, What can I say, Commander? We have different dreams. Turning to Corsi, Gold said, We're not leaving Talar in the lurch security-wise, are we, Commander? I don't think so, sir, Corsi said. Honestly, the only reason they needed our help was because the generator went down. With that back up, the locals should be able to handle any further problems. Any casualties? Gold asked Lenz. Just some bumps and bruises. Emmett's handling it. Gold gave Lenz a funny look at that, but said nothing. Good! Commander Cho's people at Starbase 12 found a match for the ship we towed. Belongs to a race called the Wadi from the Gamma Quadrant. In fact, they were the first race from the Gamma to make contact with Deep Space Nine after the Bajoran wormhole opened. And it fell through a gateway? Stevens asked. Gold nodded, and had the stuffing pounded out of it at some point, by the looks of it. Stevens chuckled. I heard stories about that first contact on DS9. I'm not surprised they got pounded. He shook his head. I wish we'd had a chance to check out the gateways before they went down. I agree, Blue said, making one of those odd noises she made. Their power consumption ratios must have been... Gold held up a hand, which Corsi was excessively grateful to see. Speculate on your own time, people. Doping out the gateways is someone else's problem. Our problem, as usual, is to clean up other people's messes. The S.C.E., the waste extraction robots of the galaxy, Duffy said with that idiotic grin of his. This particular mess, Gold continued, is at a waste extractor we've been to before, so to speak. Meglin. Corsi winced. Not the Andrasi again. Chuckling, Duffy said, That's what Fabe said. Corsi winced again. We should be so lucky, Gold said. No, it's another gateway problem. Apparently, a gateway showed up on Meglin too, and it had no trouble operating in the duonetic field either. Gomez leaned forward. Completely unaffected? That's what they tell us. She nodded. Actually, that fits. The gateways seem to have a huge power store on their own. It's only the ones that got used heavily, like the ones in the Tellarite system, that started draining power from other sources. According to the communique from Governor Tack, nobody on Meglin used the gateway. They couldn't tell what it was, and they didn't want to risk it. Besides, the readings they were able to take on the other side were weird. Weird? Duffy asked with a smile. They're sending the telemetry now, but that's a minor point. After our old pal Nog did that little 10-minute shutdown of the gateway. Several people gave Duffy amused glances at that. Duffy seemed to slide further into his seat. Corsi thought he damn well should look abashed. Nog was a good officer, and he deserved better treatment than Duffy gave him back on Empok Nor. Corsi never liked Duffy much, though he comported himself decently enough against the Tholians, but mostly she thought him a sorry excuse for an officer. She expected that kind of behavior from the non-coms, but Duffy was an academy graduate. Suddenly, the gateway was a hotbed of activity. All sorts of things came running out of it. What kinds of things? Gomez asked. Gold grinned. Monsters. Corsi pursed her lips. The captain could sometimes be frivolous, though never to a fault, but this was just silly. Monsters? Well, no, not really, but they sure do fit the profile. Gold touched a panel on the table in front of him, and an image appeared on the view screen. It was a large biped with scaly yellow skin and a huge tail. That was followed by an image of a flying creature that vaguely resembled an Earth pteranodon, and then another image of something that Corsi swore was a dead ringer for a Vulcan Sellat, only, based on the house it was standing next to, about 10 times the size. My God, they are monsters, Karol Abramowitz said, as the image shifted to a six-legged creature with compound eyes and massive insectoid wings. Every one of those looks like something out of a childhood nightmare. Speak for yourself, Blue said haughtily. All our childhood nightmares on Nasat involve short, skinny bipeds. Gomez turned to Gold. How many? So far, these 4 are the only ones they have images of, but the reports indicate at least 2 more roaming around. No sentient fatalities yet, but they have been consuming crops and animals. That could wreak havoc with the ecosystem, Len said. Introducing a whole new host of new predators into the environment? So we need to do what? Gomez asked. Help them round up the creatures? And communicate with them if possible. It'll take 4 hours to get there from here. Gomez, Duffy, Blue, Stevens, I want you to give us ways to get equipment to work as efficiently as impossible in that duonetic soup down there. Get Barnack to help out, and anyone else you need. We don't have much time, and the Megleen have enough problems without half a dozen rabbits stomping through their briar patches. Get to it, people. Everyone got up. Most made a beeline for the exits. Corsi finished her espresso and went to the replicator to get another one. Gold went up to Gomez and Duffy, who were standing extremely close to each other. I'm guessing you 2 had a lunch date. Sorry to cut it short. We'll have other chances, Gomez said with a smile. It's not that. I want you to eat more. You need some meat on your bones, Commander. You almost wasted away to nothing on Sarandar. Duffy grinned. I'm trying to fatten her back up, sir. Chuckling, Gold said, get to work. They departed, leaving Gold and Corsi alone in the room. All right, Commander, what's on your mind? Corsi blinked. I'm sorry, sir? You've been drilling your baby blues into my head since the meeting started. What's bugging you? 95% of the time, Corsi was grateful to have a CO who was perceptive. This particular instant fell into the wrong 5%, however. To her surprise, words did fall out of her mouth. I don't think what those 2 are doing is appropriate, sir. One of Gold's bushy eyebrows raised. I beg your pardon? I don't think it's appropriate for the 2 of them to be involved given their situation. Regulations are sufficiently vague, Gold interrupted, and generally left to the captain's discretion. His voice grew deeper, which Corsi knew was his more serious tone. This particular captain has no problems with it as long as it doesn't interfere with the performance of their duty. Both their service record and my observations of them since they've been under my command indicate to me that it won't be an issue. If I'm wrong, I'll deal with it, but there's been nothing to suggest it's an issue yet. Are you questioning my judgment, Commander? Corsi knew that there was only one answer to that question. No, sir. I withdraw the objection, sir. Good! He broke into a smile. I do value these little chats, Commander. Anytime you have a grievance, don't hesitate to bring it to my attention. In a much smaller voice, she said, yes, sir, and moved toward the door. Oh, and Commander? Corsi stopped, but did not turn around. Sir? Whenever you're ready to tell me what's really bothering you, I'll be here. Definitely the wrong 5%, Corsi thought. Yes, sir, she repeated, and left the observation lounge. Damn you, Dar. Chapter 4. Lynn had been spending more and more time at the lake lately. Well, her free time, anyhow. She did her chores, of course, and was at the table for mealtimes, but aside from that, she liked the lake better than being around her parents. It wasn't that she didn't love her parents. She loved them more than anything, except maybe Egromat pie. But lately, all they did was argue. It didn't used to be that way. They used to be nice all the time. But then all this stuff stopped working right. Lynn remembered it really well since it was right after her 5th birthday. It had been her best birthday yet, with lots of Egromat pie. It was also around when those weird brown people came, and those other weird people. They all had the silliest noses. They were all long and skinny and the absolute strangest thing Lynn had ever seen. After they came and stuff stopped working right, Lynn's parents started fighting. They had never fought before, but now they couldn't do anything else. Lynn picked up a stone and threw it into the lake. It made a nice splooshing sound. She picked up another stone and did the same thing. This kept her attention for several minutes until she ran out of stones. So she decided to start walking around the edge of the lake. This was one of her favorite things to do. So far, she had never fallen in. Well, okay, there was that one time when her father surprised her by calling her name, but aside from that, she'd never fallen in. Her arms extended to keep her balance better, Lynn started walking around the lake. The sun was starting to go down, so when she came around, the sun was in her eyes. She stopped, blinked the glare out of her eyes, then started walking again. Or she would have, except there was a big furry thing in the way. Lynn screamed and lost her balance. She twirled her arms in an attempt to get it back, but it didn't work, and she fell in. Luckily, she had fallen in before and knew what to do. She swam. It wasn't like the last time when she almost swallowed all that water. She wasn't a baby anymore, and she was smart. She learned how to swim, and now she kicked her legs and stroked with her arms. Within seconds, she was back at the edge of the lake. The furry thing was still there, staring at her with big yellow eyes. It was more than twice as big as Lynn. It was covered in brown fur and had a long snout that looked like a funny mix of a proper snout and those weird strangers' noses. It also had lots of really sharp teeth and big claws. Hello? Lynn said softly. Her parents had always tried to get her to speak more forcefully, but she was shy. She was also cold from all the water, which was dripping on the ground. It had been lying on all fours. Now it gestured with one of its front paws and then made some kind of weird noise. My name's Lynn. What's yours? It made another gesture, then made another noise. Then it reached into the lake and splashed some water. Lynn frowned. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do next. So she did the same thing. Her splash was a lot smaller than the furry thing's, of course. The furry thing seemed to like this, and then it made a funnier noise and splashed again. Lynn decided to make the same noise, or at least come really close to it, and splashed again. She tried to splash harder, so she could make almost as much noise as the furry thing. Lynn! That was her father's voice. I'm over here! She cried out. For some reason, the furry thing didn't like this. It started shaking and making a really awful noise. Don't worry, Lynn said. It's just my father. He's usually really nice, except when he and my mother are fighting, but still, you'll like them. Lynn's father came over the small hill that led to the lake. As soon as Lynn saw him, she said, Look! I made a new friend! She had thought that her father would be happy to see the furry thing, as he seemed to be nice and friendly. But her father started getting that look he always got whenever he argued with her mother. Move away from that, Lynn! Now! What's wrong? Lynn asked, confused. Her father grabbed a stick off the ground and waved it at the furry thing. Get away from her! He yelled. Lynn noticed that the nostrils in his snout were wider than usual. The furry thing just made another strange noise. But then it surprised Lynn by getting up on its hind legs. Her father then got a weird look on his face. It took Lynn a moment to figure it out. He looked scared. Lynn couldn't believe it. Her father was never scared. I said, get away from her! Lynn, move away! But move away! Lynn didn't move. She didn't understand. The furry thing was just a nice animal who came to watch her walk along the lake. She thought maybe she could explain. The furry thing waved its arms and made another noise. He isn't trying to... Lynn started to say. Get back! Her father yelled. Then he threw the stick at the furry thing. The furry thing batted the stick away. Then it made another noise. Lynn's father grabbed her, picked her up, and ran back toward the farm. Lynn screamed. Not because of the furry thing, but because her father was hurting her. She was just trying to make a new friend. The furry thing continued to cry out, but it didn't follow them back to the house. As soon as they got back inside their large house, her father finally put her down as she could breathe properly again. Why did you do that? Lynn asked. It was just... What the broba were you thinking? Her father yelled so loud that the windows rattled. Don't ever get close to a crazed animal like that. It wasn't an animal. It was... Don't talk back to me. Now stay inside. Her father went into one of the closets. The door to it was always open because the doors didn't always work right. Her mother figured it was better to just leave it open all the time. He grabbed the nasty gun. Lynn got scared. You're not going to shoot him, are you? Damn right I am. Nobody tries to kill my little girl. He wasn't trying to kill me. Why won't you listen to me? But her father still wasn't listening. Instead, he was calling for her mother to look after Lynn while he went out with a gun. Lynn was scared. Not so much for herself, but for the furry thing. She hoped it would be okay. Chapter 5. Take a look at this, Keir. Lieutenant Jill Barnack, chief engineer of the Da Vinci, and the only person who referred to Kieran Duffy as Keir, for which Kieran had always been grateful, plunked the two boots down on the workbench in engineering. Kieran looked at them for several seconds. Those are gravity boots, he said, showing what Sonny often referred to as his keen grasp of the obvious. Yep. Continuing in that vein, he added, and they're blue. Yep. Okay, I'll bite. Why are they blue? Fabian, P.A. Blue, and Sonia all chose that moment to enter engineering. Sonny had called a meeting to see what progress had been made in what Kieran had been jokingly referring to as Operation Mighty Maeglin Monster Hunt. Fabian grinned. They're not happy with their lot in life? Patty joined in. They're long-lost relatives of mine? No, Jill said with an amused shake of his graying head. It's blue because making it pink would have been silly. Kieran chuckled. Of course, that should have been my first guess. In any case, Jill continued, it's a coating of my own design. It'll keep out the effects of the duonetic field. You sure? Sonny asked. Tested it in the hololab myself. The Da Vinci did not have a holodeck as such, but one lab had been given over to holographic use. The hololab was strictly used only for duty-related matters, much to the chagrin of most of the crew complement, though Corsi would have been just as happy to have gotten rid of it altogether. But it was too useful for bench tests and other applications to not have. Kieran had tried to find a way to finagle using it for a date, but Sonny shot that down before he could even finish the sentence. Patty made one of her tinkling sounds. That'll work for anything that doesn't have a display or an interface. Beats a kick in the head, certainly, Kieran said. Thanks, Jill. Ina to Gomez. Go ahead, Sonny said, tapping her comm badge. Commander, I have downloaded the telemetry from Maeglin sent us of their probes into the gateways. You should take a look at this. Pipe it down to engineering, Mar. Acknowledged. Sonny walked over to a wall console, Kieran behind her. Patty, Jill, and Fabian remained at the workbench, but fixed their gazes on the screen. Curious enough to look, but not wanting to crowd the first and second officer, Kieran thought with a smile. Kieran peered at the readouts, but couldn't make heads or tails of it. Sonny was looking at it pretty intently, though. Mara, is that what I think it is? Looks like it, Commander. Whatever was on the other side of that gateway wasn't in this universe. Kieran put his head in his hands. Oh, God, no. Interdimensional travel always gives me a stomachache. Actually, Patty said, it's not that bad. Though sorely tempted to pursue that revelation with the NASAT, Kieran knew they didn't have time. Mar, have any of the other gateways been like that? I thought they were just space portals. Way ahead of you, Commander. Apparently there was an interdimensional gateway they found in the Sagittarius cluster about 100 years ago that might have been one of the Iconians. There have also been some reports of some of the gateways being time portals. So there's some precedent for atypical gateways, anyhow. Good work, Sonny said, and Kieran silently agreed with the sentiment. Keep digging. See if you can find any more specifics. Maybe we'll get lucky. Yes, sir. Inamar, research junkie, Kieran muttered with amusement. This was a side to their Bajoran ops officer they hadn't known about. She plays a mean saxophone, too, Fabian said. How the heck did a Bajoran learn to play the saxophone? Kieran asked. What, Bajorans can't play human instruments? I didn't say that. If you two are finished, Sonny said with an indulgent grin. Patty, think we can cobble together a force field generator that'll work? With Jill's paint? Absolutely, Patty said with one of her happier tinkles. I should have a dozen of them ready by the time we arrive. Sonny turned to Fabian. What about weapons, Fabian? No joy there, the black-haired engineer said, blowing out a breath. I've tried everything. Yes, Commander, even that scattering field negating trick you pulled on the Breen and the Ehrlicha. But none of them got past the deadening effect of the duonetic field. We may have to settle for them conking out on us periodically. Setting her fist down on the workbench, Sonny leaned forward and said, We're not settling for anything. Why not just use the paint? Patty asked. Kieran shook his head. Once we apply it, we're stuck with whatever setting it's on when it gets painted. We don't even know what settings are effective against these things. We have to be able to change it. And, Jill added, if we don't paint the panel, it'll be just as susceptible to the duonetic field. Patty made one of her more contemplative tinkles. Well, why not use a remote control? This time it was Sonny who shook her head. No, that won't work either. It'll be just as susceptible to the field. Not if I make a force field small enough to fit around someone's hand. It'll make a wrist unit. I'll make a wrist unit. Fabian smiled. That could work. Whoever's armed can fire the phaser with one hand and change the settings with the remote in the other hand. Jill rested one large hand on his equally large stomach. Yeah, but that means they can only fire one-handed, and the other hand will be useless. They won't be able to do anything except shoot. Shrugging, Kieran said, That's the long definition of security guard. With an amused tinkle, Patty said, I dare you to say that in front of Corsi. Do I look stupid? Kieran, don't ask questions you can't handle honest answers to, Sonny said with a wicked grin. Okay, she went on, growing more serious. So, we'll try to herd these guys with light phaser fire and cage them in force fields until we can figure out what to do with them. Hopefully, even with the duonetic field, the universal translators will be able to work out their language. And I want recordings of every encounter with these things for Bart, in case the UTs need some help. Now, what about the ones that can fly? What about the one who can fly? Or ones, Fabian said. We still don't know what they all look like. That's why I asked Jill for the boots, Kieran said. I figure I can play chicken with the flyboy. Or boys, he amended with a look at Fabian. And lure it to the ground and let one of Core Breach's flunkies and Patty's force fields do the rest. Isn't that dangerous? Patty asked. Sonny grinned. Says the woman who spent the morning crawling around the outer hull of a comm relay. Don't worry, Kieran's got an A rating with the boots. In fact, I remember a certain holodeck program in Ardana that you were quite adept in. As opposed to you, Kieran said, who kept flying into the clouds. I prefer to keep my feet on the ground, thanks. Commander, Jill said hesitantly. The Atrian scratched his oversized ear. What, Jill? Well, what if Lieutenant Enos said is correct? These things aren't from this dimension. Right? Well, I assume the reason why you checked the telemetry of the gateway was to see where they came from, and maybe get them home if they came from close enough. I mean, we can't use the gateways anymore. From what I understand, they've been permanently shut down. But they could easily be from this general area of the Milky Way, and we could get them home then. But if they're from another universe altogether... There was quiet around the workbench for several seconds. Then Sonny finally said, We'll build that bridge when we come to it. Besides, even if this was one of the regular gateways, there's every chance they'd be from somewhere deep in the Beta Quadrant, or the Delta Quadrant, or a part of the Gamma Quadrant that's nowhere near the Bajoran wormhole. Right now, our priority is figuring out a way to minimize the damage they're doing to Magellan. We'll worry about the possibility of returning them later. Jill nodded. Sonny looked around the workbench. Fabian, Kieran, set up the remotes to the phasers. Patty, Jill, make us some force fields. I'll coordinate with Corsi on the security arrangements. Let's go. Kieran smiled. Sonny had always been the take-charge type, but there was something different about her ever since she came back from Sarandar. Of course, since that's also when she decided we should be an item again, I'm probably biased, he thought with a smile as he and Fabian started their work on the remotes. To be continued next week. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel so you'll be alerted when there's a new one, although it's usually on Tuesday. You can check me out online at DeCandido.net. My blog is at DeCandido.wordpress.com. And as I said at the beginning of the thing, you can catch me on Patreon at patreon.com/KRAD, where you can support me in my wonderful writerly endeavors. Thank you very much for watching, and please stay safe.